name is Justin, and I am a son of God and an addict, and the host of the Rico 12 speaker meeting. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I'm sober one day at a time since June 19th, 2015. And for that, I am beyond grateful. Welcome to Rico 12. We are an organization whose addictions include alcohol, drugs, lust and sex, food and gambling, just to name a few. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to learn the similarities of addiction and to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom webinar each Friday at noon Central Time for about 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of that speaker for another 20 to 25 minutes. If you are hearing this meeting in recorded podcast form and would like to participate as a live audience member in the future, please go to rico12.com to learn more and submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations. And something that came up in this as this meeting was starting, it's a unique link each Friday. So to receive that unique link, please get on that email list. You'll just get a couple of emails per week with that link. All right, Rico 12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our Step 12 in this manner. We gratefully accept contributions to help cover the costs of Zoom platform, podcast platform, web hosting, and administrative costs. To contribute, you can go to rico12.com/support, or you can click the link to PayPal in the chat of the live meeting or in the show notes of the podcast. When you contribute, please specify the meeting number. This is number 69. One more word about our speakers before we introduce today's speaker. When we line up a guest speaker for a meeting, we ask them to seek guidance on what and how to present so that they can reflect the light that they have been given. That light will inspire hope, meaning, worth, and growth in each of us, the listening audience. Now let's introduce our guest speaker for today, who is a repeat guest for whom I am extremely grateful for. He's doing a fill-in for another guest who was unable to speak today, Cameron F., whose topic is, why did I relapse? And I love this. I'm excited to hear about his process with this. Here's the intro and Cameron's bio, a little bit of it. Cameron F. has been a member of Cocaine Anonymous since November 21st, 2003. As a big book sponsor, he has worked with all kinds of addicts from all around the world. He facilitates a 12 Steps in 4 hours workshop and has carried the 12-step message of recovery to well over 3,000 suffering addicts over the past many years, but he talked about that in the last year. His recovery message, it only takes a day to learn the 12-step program and the rest of your life to practice it. He is currently the archivist, or he was when I last talked to him, for the Southern Ontario area of Cocaine Anonymous and the archive chair for CA World Services out of Los Angeles, California. Cameron, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Oh, thank you, Justin. It's much appreciated. It's over 5,000 people now, largely due to COVID. In the last year alone, we've taken some 3,000 people or introduced them to how the 12-step program works and reiterated that message of it only takes a day to learn it and the rest of your life to work it. So it's great to be here. You know, my primary fellowship is Cocaine Anonymous, but I certainly do qualify in CODA. I love the battle cry of the codependent. I need you to change how you think, feel, and behave towards me in order for me to feel okay. And I spent a lot of years suffering with that particular perspective. I also relate well to the SLAW fellowship, especially the fantasy addictions. And I never really understood it till I started working with other fantasy and love addicts and began to see the thinking obsessions and that obsessive compulsive pattern of thought that drives these poor souls to the gates of insanity or death. So it's been it's a wonderful thing to transcend the specificity of any addiction and see the universality of the 12-step program and how it can provide that efficacy and relief to so many, where by introducing themselves to a power greater than themselves, they're able to easily control that desire to drink, use, or act out. A subject that's very close to my heart, and I see so much of in the rooms, is relapse, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. You know, I've set this presentation up, and I'll post a link in the chat afterwards, where if you like this approach, I've created an article on one of my websites, and you can certainly access it and use it in your own work and sponsorship, because I'm going to conclude the presentation with a series of questions that you can ask of the person who's relapsing to kind of target where the problem is and help them get back on track and get reconnected and stop the acting out addiction. So our stories, disclose in a general way what we're like, what happened, what we're like today, what I was like as an untreated addict, just to qualify, just so no one's concerned here that I wandered in from Denny's because I'm, bored. So as an untreated addict, first and foremost, I love drinking, I love using, and I can even enjoy acting out in that crazy way. And I love it so much because it is my solution. I love it more than every job I've been fired from. I love it more than the health and welfare of my children. I love it more than my marriage. I love it more that I'm willing to risk my life for that amazing effect. I remember my doctor diagnosing me with liver disease and saying I was going to die. And the first thought that crossed my mind is, I need a drink right now. And, normal people don't understand that, but those who suffer from addiction understand the compulsion to drink or use or act out even when we don't want to. I can admit as an untreated addict that my life is in the toilet. I've burned my life to the ground, but I still can't figure out the baffling nature of the true and the false of my situation. Our big book refers to it as that mental blank spot, that strange phenomenon that parallels our sound reasoning that fails to hold us in check. I refer to it as a liar. I got a liar that lives in my head, that twist of thinking, and it doesn't want to give up drinking and using under any circumstances. So it built this research institute in my brain called Bullshit Inc. And it is working on new ideas, new excuses, new justifications, new reasons. Even though my life is in the toilet, this time when I do it, it's going to be okay. And here's the problem. The liar would always win the argument. I had no defense against that liar. It would always win the argument. Now, in the beginning, because as I'm untreated, my general disposition is restless, irritable, discontented. I'm bored, I'm depressed, I'm anxious all the time. And I don't like feeling that way. So I sought a solution, and I discovered this solution. It was drinking and using. And it seemed like the answer. Remember the first time you had a drink or you tried a drug or you acted out in that way that you loved to act out so much, and it was like, wow, yeah, this is exactly the way I want to be. It was my solution to what ailed me. See, it's not my problem, it's my solution. Running out was a problem. But the drinking and the drugging was my solution. And in the beginning, like I said, it seemed like the answer. But what started off as a luxury soon progressed into something quite dark, where I'd like to tell you, hey, I'm just going to go to the pub, have a pint, maybe a couple shots of bourbon and go home. But I really can't predict what's going to happen once I start. And when I do start, I go into what's called a spree, where I have no control over my consumption or my acting out. And it could last a day, a week, a month, a year, or even longer. And I can't seem to stop that train wreck from happening. And then eventually I emerge from it and I'm full of remorse and I got the horror and the hopelessness, and I make a firm resolution not to do it again. And I know so many of us have made that resolution coming off the spree. And we really believe it. And like I've said before, you could hook up lie detector tests to us. It would register as truthful. We mean it with all our heart. But what happens? I don't know how to live with it anymore, but I can't live with it anymore, but I have no idea how I'm going to live without it. So I come into the rooms thinking, going to meetings, meeting makers make it, 90 and 90, meetings, go to a meeting is the answer. And we have people in our fellowships drinking sand, thinking that's the water. And they sit there, and here's what happened. I came into the rooms. I had no solution. I just knew I couldn't drink or use anymore. And I sat there, and I entered into what I call sobriety, where I got no solution. I have no way on how to live without booze and drugs. So I start getting irritable and restless and discontented and bored and depressed. And my liar comes out of remission and says, hey, Cameron, we need our solution. We want first love back. And I succumb to the desire again, and out I go. And I go around that wheel of misfortune, spree, remorse, resolution, spree, remorse, resolution, pursuing my love of drinking, using, or acting out to the gates of insanity or death. And there's nothing anyone can do for me. And that's kind of a sucker punch of step one. It's a realization, I will drink and use again. And for me to drink and use again is the die. And there's nothing anyone can do for me. Everything secular, everything human fails to hold me in check. That's an awful conclusion. One other thing about coming into the rooms without a solution, the suicide rates in 12 steps today is 80 times higher than normal society. That's in the Oxford Handbook to Psychiatry. And the reason for that is they have found that untreated addiction, you are 80 times more likely to commit suicide in the first 5 years. And we're seeing that a lot in the rooms of people taking their lives in sobriety because they're insane. They're not relapsing, but they're insane and they're taking their lives. Out of the 5,000 people I've worked with, 40 that I work with directly are dead. Mostly to booze and alcohol. Alcohol is still one of the most dangerous drugs out there, although benzos are bad too, and fentanyl is bad. But out of the 40, 9 took their own lives. They hung themselves in sobriety. They could not, would not see our way of life. And this is the horror of step one. Yet, as a member of Cocaine Anonymous and a member of a 12-step fellowship, it's been 17 years from the age of 20 to the age of 46. The only thought on my mind was morning, noon, and night. How do I get high, get higher? To having 17 years of being able to easily control my desire to drink or use. How is that possible? And I was fortunate enough to meet someone in these rooms who was not only armed with the facts about themselves, they had a solution, a generosity of spirit, and they showed me a way out of that inescapable hole. And what a miracle the 12-step program's been in my life. I was able to rebuild a destroyed marriage. My wife and I are together 31 years this year. My best friend, my confidant, my business partner, my soulmate, my daughter, who I was estranged with. She was over last night. We had a wonderful visit together. I have a great relationship with my 35-year-old daughter. My son, who's 37, he has an autistic boy. He's 10 years old, my grandson. And, you know, to be sober for him, to be there for my son and his family and the challenges he has, man, that's a gift CA and 12 steps has given me day in and day out. My liver went back to normal after 6 years. I went from a 26-year losing streak to a 17-year winning streak. Man, it is a great life being a member of Cocaine Anonymous. And that's why I like to differentiate between being a member and an untreated addict. And, so my liver went back to normal. I went back to university. Now, I noticed 3 great predictors of recovery. 1, we work with others. That's always an important predictor of good recovery. 2, we go back to school, make ourselves more useful to our families, our careers, our community about us. You know what the third thing I see happening with a lot of addicts that got good recovery? They fix their teeth. I don't know what it is about teeth, but people start fixing their teeth in recovery. Who's got money for teeth when we're out there actively doing what we're doing? So those are 3 good predictors. I went back to university, graduated 2016, top of my class in medical anthropology and religions. There's a line in the big book that says, go out and see what other religious people are doing. So being an addict and obsessively compulsive, I thought, I'll go get a degree in religions. And that's what I did. I've started groups. I've been GSR. I've been secretary. I've been treasurer. I've worked at the area level. I've done most of the service committee positions, served on 9 conventions. I'm still the Southern Ontario archivist for CA, and I'm still the world archivist for LA, Cocaine Anonymous World Services. So one of the things, you know, as Justin had already mentioned, my favorite quote is, it only takes a few hours to learn it and the rest of our lives to practice the 12-step program. So it doesn't take a long time to learn how to work it. Yet we see relapse after time and time again. Why is that? How is that? Why does that occur? What do sponsors usually talk about? They talk about their sponsees relapsing. Now, I'll say this before I get into this message of relapse. All the power of our program is availed to us and through us when we take the 12 steps and we teach it to others. We get to keep it by giving it away. We pay it forward. That's the key. The whole point is to learn your 12 steps, work your 12 steps, and carry the message to the other addict. Anyone who's never worked with a newcomer, you're the very first newcomer you take on, you'll grow your program 1,000-fold. I've been through it over 5,000 times. Every time I go through it, I learn something new about myself. I learn something new about 12 steps. I learn something new about being helpful to newcomers. It's a program that keeps on giving. And that's what I like to think being a member of a 12-step fellowship looks like. So relapse. If it only takes a few hours to learn how it works in the rest of our lives to work it, why is it that people relapse? So having worked with addicts from all over the world and the reasons of relapse amongst those with sobriety time seems to always point to the same conditions. They stopped working the program. And this share that I'm about to do with you is a synopsis of these experiences I've had working with newcomers. I got sober by working the 12 steps, and that was a miracle in my life because for years, the only thing on my mind, morning, noon, and night, was how do I get high? How do I stay high? How do I get higher? And the desire to drink, use, or act out was gone. Life was great. My family relationships improved. I started working again. I was even able to save a little money. And then I went on cruise control, and I got cocky and complacent, and my program began to waver. The first principle I let go of was unselfish work with other addicts. This was my 12th step. Intensive work with other addicts was too strenuous. I was too busy to carry the message to other suffering addicts, so I stopped working with newcomers and having fellowship with other recovered addicts. Next to go was step 11. I stopped listening to God through meditation. I eventually also stopped talking to God through prayer. My conscious contact with God diminished. What used to be an intuitive direction now became muddled confusion. Next, step 10 ceased to be part of my daily routine. I got bogged down with the minutiae of daily life. I stopped watching for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. I stopped asking God for guidance. I stopped discussing my shortcomings with others. I didn't bother to clean up my mistakes or make amends for my wrongdoings, nor did I turn my thoughts to someone I could help. When I quit working my daily program of action, my spiritual fitness began to wane. I no longer wanted to clean up my past and set matters right. I discarded my step 8 list of people I'd harmed and ceased to make any further direct amends, as suggested in step 9. Guilt, shame, remorse over the things I had done began to creep back into my thought life, disturbing my peace of mind and serenity. Step 7 ceased to be part of my evening prayer and meditation. I no longer asked God to remove my character defects, nor did I ask God to give me the strength to be honest, pure, unselfish, and loving. With that, I ceased doing my step 6. I failed to see the futility and the fatality of my character defects and their terrible destructiveness. My shortcomings were no longer objectionable, and I became unwilling to let them go. Next to go was steps 4 and 5. I no longer confessed my shortcomings with others because I stopped taking a fearless and moral inventory of myself. Resentments, fears, harms to others began to pile up, and I once again became blocked from the sunlight of the Spirit. No longer did I want to turn my will and my life over to God as suggested in step 3. I had better ideas. 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity drove me to selfish and self-centered behaviors. I gave up searching for the great reality deep down within me. I became unwilling to believe in a power greater than myself. I lost my faith in step 2, and once again, lack of power became my dilemma. Having no power, I had no defense against my addiction. My sound reasoning failed to hold me in check. The insane idea won out. All had gone well for a time, and relapse was unthinkable, but I failed to enlarge my spiritual life, and to my consternation, I found myself drunk, high, or acting out in a very short period of time. Once again, I was at step 1. I was powerless over alcohol, drugs, and my acting out behavior, and my life had become unmanageable. I've heard this story many times over my years of working with others. Question: what can the relapser do about it? Well, I've got good news and bad news. First, the bad news. Unless we can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of our recovery. Congratulations, you're going to die. Now, that's the bad news. And if you want to be a real dick, just stop working with them at that point. But what we want to impart is the good news. That's why, sometimes it drives me crazy when I go into those rooms where it's just problem, like group therapy without a therapist. We have a solution. This is the good news. And the Big Book Promise states that when the spiritual malady is overcome, my mind and body straightens out. So I want you to imagine, we have 3 layers to our addiction. The first layer is our bodily reaction to alcohol, the drugs, the obsessive compulsive behavior when we either ingest them or have those first thoughts or acts. That's that. And that creates that physical craving. Under that is a second layer, the insanity of the mind just before that first drink, that first drug, that first thought or act. That's the mental obsession. I call it the liar. Under that is a third layer. This is the inward condition that triggers the mental obsession, that triggers the liar, which in turns trigger that first drug, that first drink, or that first thought or act. And that is what we call the spiritual malady. Now, symptoms of this third layer are described in the book. So I'm going to ask 15 questions here, Justin. So everyone that's listening, just make a mental check, yes or no, as I go through them to see what your inward condition is like. 1, having trouble with personal relationships. 2, not being able to control our emotional natures. 3, being prey to or suffering from misery and depression. 4, not being able to make a living or a successful life. 5, having feelings of uselessness. 6, being full of fear. 7, unhappiness. 8, the inability to be of real help to other people. 9, being like an actor who wants to run the whole show. 10, being driven by fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. 11, self-will run riot. 12, leading a double life. 13, living like a tornado, running through the lives of others. 14, exhibiting selfish and inconsiderate habits. And 15, being restless, irritable, and discontented. Those are all benchmarks to symptoms of our spiritual malady. So ask yourself, am I suffering from the spiritual malady? Particularly if you haven't had a drink or a drug or you haven't acted out in a while. Currently, what is the condition of your inner life? Are you experiencing any of the symptoms listed previously? When I work with people in relapse, they usually get anywhere from 13, 14 to 15 out of 15 symptoms going on in their life. They're blocked. So what can we do about it? So I have these 12 questions that I ask to target, because if it only takes a few hours to learn it, the question is where are they not applying it? Where are they exercising half measures which avail us nothing? Where are they employing faith but no work? So let's figure out where in the 12 steps are they off the rails. So the first question I ask is, when was the last time you took another addict through the steps? How long has it been? Number 2, how long has it been since you've gone through the steps? 3, have you ever taken all of the 12 steps? 4, have you done more than one 4-step inventory? And if you have done more than one 4-step inventory, when was the last time you did that? 5, have you completed all your 9th step amends wherever possible? And if not, what remains to be done? 6, is there something wrong in your life that you will not face and make right? And if yes, what is that? Could be a relationship, could be a career, a job, something that isn't right. You know it ain't right, but you can't seem to let it go. Is there a habit or an indulgence you will not give up? If yes, what is it? Now, I'm not speaking of the overt habit or indulgence we suffer from. It's that attendant stuff. Like in Cocaine Anonymous, I work with a lot of people that they engage in pornography. Now, it's not their addiction, but it's not conducive to a good program. Smoking is another one. If we're going to grow a divine presence within our temple, which is our physical body, it's very hard to grow the divine if we're polluting our temple with bad foods or cigarettes or what have you. So is there a habit or an indulgence you will not give up? And if so, what is that? 8, is there a person in your life you will not forgive? There are some people I do not like. I have a lot of animosity, but my program demands forgiveness, because without it, I suffer the symptoms of that malady. I get restless, irritable, discontented, and then the liar comes out to play, and that's bad news for me. So, is there a person in your life you will not forgive? And if so, who is that? Is there a wrong relationship in your life that you will not give up? If yes, what is it? Could be a relationship with a person or a thing or a substance or what have you. Is there a wrong relationship in your life you will not give up? Is there a restitution you will not make? And if so, what is it? 11, is there something God has already told you to do that you will not obey? And if yes, what is that? And are you working in the disciplines and practices of step 10 and 11, self-examination, meditation, and prayer consistently every day? Now, in conclusion, it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We're headed for trouble if we do, because alcohol, drugs, obsessive and compulsive behaviors is a subtle foe. Remember, the liar's out to kill us. I'm like a dog that returns to its vomit. I know the vomit is bad for me, but my liar convinces me I should somehow eat it again, only to vomit it, only to eat it again. Like a dog that returns to its vomit as an untreated addict. And we're not cured of our addiction. What we do is we put the liar into remission. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. We maintain our spiritual condition through the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. Every day is a day we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These thoughts, these spiritual principles that we learn must go with us constantly. And we can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It's the proper use of the will, God's will, not self-will. I hear so many relapse go, I took my will back, I took my will back. You never lose your will. It's a question of motive. Are you using your willpower to live in that fourth column, in those character defects, being dishonest and resentful and selfish and fearful? Or are you using all your willpower to live an honest, pure, unselfish, and loving life? And by doing so, I access a power that lets me easily control that desire to drink, use, or act out. And so what we have been given us is we've been given a life, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Remember, recovery is not a sprint. It's a marathon for life, and I'm for that. How about you? God bless you. My name's Cameron. I'm an alcoholic addict who doesn't drink or use. Thanks for hearing me out.
Wow, Cameron, thank you so much. Those lists of questions were amazing and very helpful. And I think you said that you'd put a link to those in the chat here, and I'll make sure that I take those links and put them in the show notes also. Thank you so much for that amazing message. We've got a few questions that have come in. And a reminder to our live audience, if you have a question for Cameron, type it in the Q&A link at the bottom of the window, and we'll get to those as they come in. And Cameron just put that link there in the chat. So very good. All right. So first question that came in is from Nikki, our good friend Nikki. Nikki says, when do you finally stop working with a chronic relapser? When does it become a waste of time? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you get some really frustrating cases. You know, the essential to recovery are honesty, willingness, and open-minded. And I'm always checking in on that. And sometimes I'll raise the bar if I feel that the prospect is perhaps, slacking off or getting a little half-measury. But I always remember Mark Houston, and Nikki and I have discussed this in the past. When you don't care, I can't. And when you do care, I must. So if I get a call and they say, Cameron, help me out, that's God saying, Cameron, it's time to carry a message. I have one man in my life who's been relapsing, and I'm just watching his life go down the toilet. And I really don't work steps with him because he's got mental illnesses that doesn't allow him to really employ the program. But whenever I see him, I'm kind and I'm considerate. I'll throw him a few bucks. I've never had to fire anyone directly, like said, you're fired, lose my number. I'd rather masturbate with a handful of broken glass than to work with you, sort of thing. Isn't that a great analogy? Oh, my God. I've never really had to fire anybody. What happens is they just stop showing up. and they usually fire me or they let go of me. But as long as they're willing to show up under any situation, I will intuitively try and connect with God to figure out, God, what do I need to do in this matter to be helpful? And that's kind of the way I approach it.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very helpful and quite the analogy there that about made me vomit there. But thank you for sharing that. All right, a question came in from Diane. It's kind of a comment, but maybe something that you can help out with. It says, "I can't seem to feel part of the herd." How do you guide somebody who may not be able to feel part of the herd, part of the fellowship, into getting to where they can feel that way?
Wow, that's a good question. It can be very intimidating and very off-putting coming into, a fellowship where everyone, even the book talks about, I went to this meeting, everybody's laughing, having a good time, and I think I'm not like these people, and there's some animosity. It can sound somewhat cultish and all kinds of different things. I had a lot of animosity towards the fellowship when I first started. I just thought me working one-on-one was all that was needed. I didn't need the fellowship. But they wrote the traditions, and they looked at us as a group that without the group we run the risk of dying alone. And I've known a lot of good big book sponsors who have died alone because they've had animosities towards the fellowship. I've grown to love the fellowship. First of all, I can't have conversations. Where else can I share an analogy that was so graphic other than in the fellowship? I share that amongst the muggles being non-wizards, Harry Potter term for a normie or an earth person. I just get awkward silence. But in the fellowship, man, we all understand one another. My wife says, "Why do you work with those people? These are awful people, right?" I said, "Excuse me." I said, "Dear, do you get murderous thoughts like every 10 minutes? And she goes, "No." I said, "Well, I do. And whenever I'm in the fellowship and I ask other acts, do you get murderous thoughts every 10 minutes? You know what they say? Yeah, I do." And so we all kind of really, that's a bit over the top, but you get what I mean. I don't go to the meetings for me. I never have. I go to the meetings because I look for people who suffer, who want a message. And the camaraderie of people like yourself, Justin, people like Nikki, where we're all on the same page, giving of ourselves unconditionally to those who suffer, and collaborating amongst ourselves as to how we do that, and supporting one another and bearing witness to the miracle of God doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. And I've grown to really love the fellowship. Even the people who are sick in the fellowship, I've grown to, when I'm in that position of neutrality, safe and protected, and I'm centered within myself, I have no animosity. I love the fellowship, and I love the people that are in it. They're special. And I don't mean Kenny eat the pace special. I hope that answers it, Diane.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cameron. All right. Another kind of a question. I'm going to create a question from this statement from Leonard. Do you see a difference between the phrase in the fellowships being in remission and being in recovery? And if so, what do you think of those two different phrases?
Wow, there's an interesting discussion behind that. I'll try and be very brief. How we identify in the program plays a very important part to our recovery. And I was at university, and this goes to the old argument: I'm a recovering addict versus I'm a recovered addict. And it creates all kinds of discussion. And it's been going on since Bill and Bob started the fellowship back in '39. The New Yorkers were always recovering, and Bob and the Akron Fellowship, who were spiritual conversionists, they were recovered. And it was always a big debate about that. When I was at university, one of my professors had done this very interesting study of recovery narratives within the Food Addicts Anonymous Fellowship. And like most fellowships, there were two genres: those who are recovering and those who are recovered. And what she found was that the recovered narrative, that these people, when they'd share their stories, they had a very delineating line between the old life and what they were like and the way they are now. Like it says in step 3, reborn into a new way of living. There was a very distinct dividing line between those two worlds. And the old life was done and the new life was present. And that group of members who spoke and identified in this way, they demonstrated consistent abstinency rates. The recovering narrative, where they were always recovering and the protagonist was always kind of a cocky foot in the old life and a lazy foot in the new life, pissing all over their recovery, if you like to think of it that way. The old life wasn't necessarily a bad life. The new life wasn't necessarily a great life. And what she found in a longitudinal study of these different narratives is that those that identified as recovering, I'm always recovering, we're never well, we're always sick, we're only an arm's length away from the next drink, that group of people could not practice consistent abstinency. So I find my liar is in remission. My liar stays in remission. My mind has been restored to sanity because I work a program that allows me to demonstrate spiritual principles that give me access to a power far greater than myself that lets me easily control my desire to drink, use, or act out. That's the key, because I can't quit. I will drink and use again. But by doing God's will, I access a power that lets me easily control it. That's the secret.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna have to listen to this 2 or 3 times because there's just so much coming in that I'm overwhelmed. But this is good stuff, Cameron. We've got several more questions here. One from Shlomi asks, for the chronic relapser who can barely get 2 days sobriety, how can they work the program to even get to the point of, hey, answering those questions about the steps?
Yeah, that's a good question, Shlomi. And I've come across that. You know, I always say there's a 3-step approach. One, there has to be an honest desire to stop. And not everybody makes it. As sad as that sounds, not everybody makes it. Most don't make it. It's too hard. It's too strenuous. They don't want to do it. First love is too great to them. But an honest desire to stop. That's why it says when you honestly want to. I meet a lot of people that come into the program. They know they need to stop, but they don't want to stop. And I never got any traction in my recovery until I crossed that proverbial line where I knew I needed to stop, but I wanted to stop. The next thing was detox. Now, depending on the addiction, detox, like for alcohol and most drugs, it's 3 to 7 days detox. So the mind's lucid enough to employ the spiritual program. Opiates can go a little longer. I'm not as familiar with the acting out addictions. Some people say it's a much longer process of detox. But regardless, honest desire to stop, a period of detox so the mind is lucid, and then rigorous application of our 12-step program. Because we have to plug into a power greater than ourselves, right? Look at the powers we're dealing with here, folks. We're dealing with alcohol, with drugs, with sex, food, gambling. Like, sex and food are the 2 most powerful energies on the planet. Food is number 1 and sex is number 2. These are powerful, powerful energies. So we've got to connect to a power far greater than that if we're going to get any attraction. And my job as a sponsor is to help you, work with you, arm in arm, in co-sponsor. Let's go look for this God. Let's go look for this power together so you can get a lick of it and realize it's far greater than the sex, far greater than the food, far greater than the alcohol or the drugs. And until that happens, they're always going to go back to first love, in my experience.
Thank you so much. All right. A question from Lindley. Lindley asks, how do you continue relationships with childhood friends that are not in program when they tend to trigger fantasies and gossip? Great question.
They're divorced now, but 2 of my dear friends were chronic dope smokers. And marijuana was always my baseline drug. And I would always go over to visit them. And they loved smoking dope 24/7. And they were always nervous because I was in sobriety. And they go, oh, Cameron, we really want to smoke a joint. I go, well, smoke one. He said, well, won't that upset you? No, knock yourself out. And they're sitting there puffing away, smoking. We were playing Scrabble, right? I always won. And I says, they don't call it dope for nothing, right? But all I got was a low-grade headache from the smoke. I wasn't triggered thinking, oh, my God, I want to do this. And, oh, God, that smells like really good dope. It was like it could have been it had no effect on me because I'm plugged into a different kind of power. So with Lindley, like if we're employing a strategy of avoiding people, places, and things rather than cease fighting them, as our step promise illuminates, we're always in the risk of being triggered. And especially with sex addiction, like the sex addict, they got to work such a rigorous program of intimacy and looking at their brothers and sisters as brothers and sisters rather than objectifying them as sexual objects when they see an image or especially today with the way people dress, in public, like, oh my God, it's like, wow, that's really gutsy. So when I see, a woman that's, really curvaceous and that spandex, which God's gift to man, spandex, like I cannot look at them as objects. If I do that, I get into lust, I get into misogyny, and I debase my sister. So my program, as I stay consciously aware of intimacy and courtesy and respect, when I see a woman, she might be a beautiful woman, but all I see is a spiritual sister. And that's the key that prevents me from triggering into behavior. But it's about mindfulness, right? Step 3 is all about being mindful. Am I living in column 4, acting out in selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate habits? Or am I living in column 5, where I'm employing a program of honesty and helpfulness and courtesy and kindness and love, et cetera, that plugs me into a far better power?
Thank you. We got a couple things here from Jill. First of all, she asks, did you get a haircut? It looks great, but let's follow it up with the other stuff. How is your sponsorship with people in person versus people online different? Have you experienced a difference in recovery in those two areas? And do you ask your sponsees to take a place of service? Do you ask your sponsees to take a place of service? I don't know what that last bit means, but maybe you do.
Yeah, no, I think I understand what she's saying. First of all, I haven't done any live face-to-face sponsorship, partly because my daughter was very high risk. She suffers from a lot of illnesses, and for her to get COVID, that would probably be very detrimental. So out of courtesy and kindness and safety to my family, I've remained virtually bound. I love the virtual network. Most people I work with that I sponsor, I do so all over the world. I've been working with a lot of people in the United Kingdom as of late. And so I like Zoom. It's convenient. I can get very personal. There's no distractions. Just me and the prospect interacting. I love the medium because, I like to really play it up. So, we'll do step 2. And at the end of step 2, I'll put on Norman Greenbaum's Spirit in the Sky to celebrate our step 2 decision. I can't do that in a, coffee shop or what have you. So I love the medium of Zoom. I can share a screen if I want to show a particular picture, like the Michelangelo picture where God's reaching out, man's reaching out to illustrate the conscious contact with the divine. I can screen share a picture. So I love Zoom for that. It's convenient. It's safe. I love Zoom in the sense that it kills step 13. Now, it's safe for me because over the years working face to face, I've been lied to, I've been robbed, I've been verbally abused, I've been physically threatened, I've been sexually harassed, my property's been damaged, my wife and children have been terrorized over the years. Like it's dangerous too working with others. So I find Zoom a really great medium. I work with men and women. I work with blacks, gays, lesbians, transgenders, Aboriginals, Jews, Christians. It's just a great medium for leveling the playing field. And so I love this is the way I like doing it. As far as service goes, yes, I encourage them to get involved in service. There's 3 legacies: recovery, our 12 steps, the unity of our fellowship and our 12 traditions, and then to take the principles of recovery and the principles of the traditions, and then to leverage out those principles in a context of the group level or the district or area level or world services and carry a message out across that kind of a medium. Man, that's an experience you don't want to miss. It's the icing on the cake. So yes, service, it's really important.
Awesome. All right. We've got a few more questions. I don't know if we're going to be able to get to all of them, but we'll get to as many as we can before this hour's up. Next one's from an anonymous attendee who says, I feel like at my age, I have the fear of missing out. So I'm figuring out, why am I doing all this work? I guess I fear being happy, joyous, and free, no healthy romance. What are your thoughts on that? It sounds like somebody who's, well, the age is an issue with feeling like they want to recover.
Well, yeah, and I would posit that that's, thinking about self. Whenever I think about Cameron, I can come up with a million things of either I'm losing or I'm not getting enough of, and then I get restless, irritable, discontent. And I think, what's the point? And then next thing you know, bourbon's on my mind. I sobered up at 46. I was at university in my 50s. Most of my classmates were 22 and 23. And there were moments when I had regret of 26 years of my life squandered. But those 26 years, like it says in our Step 9 promise, we'll see how our experience, no matter how far down the scale we've gone, can be of usefulness to others. And I've utilized that. And I'm at a point now, I don't want to sound arrogant, but if I got a diagnosis, and touch wood, I don't get it, where the doctor said, Cameron, you've got a month to live, I think I'm pretty much at peace with my Creator, that I have lived life as I was meant to live it over these last 17 years. I always like to make, it's kind of humorous, but I get a lot of people that are in their 50s. They feel a lot of regret. What am I to do now that I'm in over 50? I go, in the game of life, or in the big game, when's all the scoring done? It's usually second half. Well, we're just into second half. So there's a lot of scoring to be done yet. And who knows what God has in store for any one of us. Doors are always opening up. I know every time I work with others and work the program and connect to a divine consciousness and to employ that will daily in my life, opportunities and new experiences are always being availed to me. So stay open to it. It's not so much what am I going to get? What is God going to give me? Which seems to be a big thing these days. It's what can I do for God? and the promises come about as a result of that. I don't know what they may be for that particular person, but I do know, if you're open to it, you might just be surprised what comes down the pike in your life.
Very good. All right, I've got one or two more questions, and then when we close out for your final statement or final thing, would you mind touching on the workshop that you do, the 12 steps in 4 hours, so that can get out there? There's some people that would really love to hear about that. But here's the questions. One question that I think is important and that you can speak to from one of our attendees. How can I bring recovery to my house and family? I have a bad relationship with my eldest daughter.
Wow, I can relate to that. My daughter, I'm right of Attila the Hun. Where's my gun? My daughter is so liberal and millennial and woke, and it's like, oh my God, we're at two opposite worlds. I don't know whether my daughter will change, but I love her unconditionally. And I'm a 65-year-old man, soon to be 65. Why would I want to argue or create animosity with my daughter? So I just try to be an example. I don't talk about things that would vex her. I treat her with kindness and courtesy and respect. And I try to be an example of God's will in life to her, so that, and whether or not she changes, it doesn't matter. Whether or not my relationship improves with her, I don't know. It has improved over the last year, because about a year and a half ago, we were estranged on my doing. I got angry with her about something, and we didn't talk for a year. And she wouldn't have anything to do with me. And I started to reach out and I said, please come back. Please, I regret so much what I've done, and I missed you. And she acquiesced, and on Christmas Eve, she came to see my wife and I, and she had dinner with us. And I know it's a little bit of a bribe, but I gave her a Christmas card with $1,000 in it. She got pretty happy with that. But it smoothed things over, and we have a good relationship now. My wife heard me. I was putting on a centering meditation. I was preparing my data center. And she goes, "Oh, Cameron, can I join you?" Absolutely. My wife and I meditated together. And it was on her it was attraction rather than, "Hey, come meditate with me." So what I'm trying to say is be an example of the program. That's more attractive than any promotion we could do, and be open and respectful to their journey. We're all on a journey, and we're all at different points of that journey, right?
Thank you so much. One more question, and then we'll have you talk about the 12 steps in 4 hours. Final question here. How do I stop trying to intellectualize God and just surrender?
Wow. Yeah, the mind, I always say the liar likes to create doubt. The liar lives in my mind. It utilizes my intellectual prowess to argue against me. Surrender. My surrender comes out of my step one. I was beaten into that state of reasonableness by all the things that failed to hold me abstinent, that failed to hold me in control. And then getting out on that losing trajectory to the gates of insanity or death. That's what beat me into surrender. So it was like giving up. I give up. My little plans and designs don't work. So God, throw me a frickin' bone here. give me something to work with. And through prayer and meditation, I get a lot of good thoughts coming into my mind. And if I'm smart enough to recognize it and obey it, it's a really good life. So here's what I found is I have faith. I have faith that God is there. I see God working through people like Justin. I noticed Camilla's on the channel. I noticed and Nikki. They bear witness to this power at play. So I have it gives me the faith that God is there. The next is with works. I got to do the work. Well, when I do the work of the program, it yields an experience. It yields the promises. And when I experience those promises, it in turn reinforces my faith, which reinforces my desire to continue doing the work. And what I like to say is it just spirals me up to heaven itself. Whereas conversely, if I lose the faith, I relapse. I come off the relapse full of horror, remorse, and hopelessness. I feel awful. My soul has been stripped. And my liar says, we need a solution. And I succumb to the desire to drink, use, or act out. And I spiraled to hell. So it really, I don't know whether talking in binaries is inappropriate, but it's a binary in my position. We either go to hell or we go to heaven. So having faith, doing the work, having promises. And I surrender more and more with each cycle of that. I keep surrendering to doing the work, having the promises, reinforcing my faith. Hope that makes sense.
Very, very nice. Thank you so much. All right. So close us out here with some words of wisdom and a little bit about the workshop that you do once a month, and then we'll close this out.
Okay. I'm going to post the link in the chat field. It only takes a day to learn how it works, the rest of our lives to practice it. Our next workshop is coming up October 31st. It's going to be Halloween. So Nikki, who helps facilitate, and we have different facilitators doing the steps. We're all going to be dressed up for Halloween. So it should be a fun presentation, the facilitators. It's a 4-hour presentation from 2 to 6 p.m. Pardon me, on Eastern Standard Time. And it literally gives you, at the end of the presentation, at the end of 4 hours, you'll understand the scope and breadth of a 12-step program, how to live the program daily in steps 10 and 11, and how to carry the message to the poor sought in the hole that doesn't know their way out, and show them how to recover and find a way out. And man, it's well, all I can say is this is the way that they always worked it quickly in the old days. Bill Wilson was 7 days sober when he started carrying the message. Ebby Thatcher was 60 days when he carried the message to Bill. Dr. Bob was 2 weeks sober when he carried the message to Bill Dotson, AA number 3. Earl T was just sober a few weeks and met Dr. Bob, and Dr. Bob took him through the steps in an afternoon and cut him loose to go start AA Chicago. They all knew that learning the steps was simple, it was quick, but practicing it day in and day out was the key. And that's what we cover in the 12 steps in 4 hours. I started this program in May of 2007. I extrapolated all the instructions out of the big book. So it's literally 30 pages of instructions, which is easily to digest, easy to learn. And over the last 14 years, that workbook, which can be downloaded on the website, has been downloaded over 630,000 times to date, and it's literally been translated into 9 different languages. It's got a life of its own out there. A lot of people seem to get value from this approach. So I hope to see you there. And it's great for those that are learning the workup program, and those of you that are sponsoring. You might bring on a prospect and introduce them to the 4 hours. And this is what we're going to be doing. So see if you want to do it, sort of thing, and qualify them. So thanks, Justin.
Thank you, Cameron. That was a great RICO 12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If we didn't get to your question, or if you have other questions, please go to rico12.com/forum and join in our community and ask those questions and answer others that may come up there. I invite the audience to come back next week. If you've not yet gone to rico12.com and submitted your email address, get on that list so that you can join us live each Friday at noon Central Time. Next week, we'll be hearing from Adeline G., and I look forward to that meeting. Now let's launch off into the rest of our day with the prayer of St. Francis that I'm going to offer. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen. Keep coming back, everybody. It works when I work it, so work it. You are worth it.
God bless everybody. See you on the firing lines of recovery.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight, still searching